The contents of this interview, or from Awake and Empowered Expo LLC from Ethann Fox and Flower of Life Center for Human Evolution, is for informational purposes only and does not necessarily reflect the viewpoints held by these organizations or individuals. Always consult with your doctor or health professional before making any changes to your diet, lifestyle, or prescription drug use. Please understand that you assume all responsibility and risk for the use or misuse of this information.
Welcome to Awake and Empowered Radio. This is Ethann Fox. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with author and alternative media celebrity Mel Ve. Her work forms the basis of the international multimedia alternative information platform Freedom Central. Through Freedom Central, she has expressed her unflinching and remarkable courage and commitment to the cause of providing a free, unbiased, and totally uncensored information platform. This endeavor has taken Mel and Freedom Central all over the world as they continue to bring information to the public through their interviews, documentaries, feature films, website, books, and radio shows. Hi Mel, welcome to our show. I'm so thrilled to have you with us. I'm sure a lot of our listeners will be looking forward to the answers to these questions that I've got planned for you today. But before we get too far into that, I wanted to ask you a little about yourself. I know you've lived a very interesting and colorful life and quite a variety of things. And can you touch on some of your life story and things that you've done, and then guide us down to how it all led you to starting Freedom Central, and definitely mention any life-changing experiences that guided you along the way?
Okay, sure. Thanks, Ethan. That's quite a story, and it's kind of difficult to know sort of how to go at a linear angle. I guess the best place to start is with my journey of discovery, which, like many people, just trying to get by. Started off in South Africa, 23 years of my life there, grew up there, and then moved to London and got into media, worked as a model, TV presenter, fashion stylist, got into producing and all sorts of things, and inherently started to notice a lot of corruption and injustice within the environments that I worked in various respects. And never quite sat with me how we were used as human resources. And innately, I always knew there was something wrong with the way things are. And deep down inside of me, I just never seemed to be happy no matter what it was that I did, even though some of the work that I did was so amazing. And I realized what the problem was, and is that everything we do revolves around money. And with this understanding, I kind of left London after having a mini breakdown and decided with my husband to go live in Holland. And during this time of first moving to Holland, I was doing Bikram yoga every day and, visiting the coffee shop every now and then, as you do when you first arrive there and it's all exciting and it's a novelty. My husband got a job very quickly because he speaks Dutch and he was working. And I started mixing with people who had some very interesting ideas. And one day someone gave me a little piece of paper on it which said Zeitgeist. And of course this is like 5 years ago, I went and Googled this and, started looking at things on the internet and realized the world is nothing like we think it is, and started to go through this whole process of collecting research and beginning the process of writing a book. And I then started Freedom Central, which, is a multimedia information platform. And I've done many different projects whilst being involved and having this sort of platform on so many different levels. Radio, made some documentary films, hosted press conferences at things like the Breakthrough Energy Movement conference, which was held in Amsterdam, and these Secret Space Program conference. I was involved with that, which was also held in Amsterdam. And there's just been so many different things. And I've realized that all of these things have really been my own personal learning ground, my own personal university. I've chosen to sort of engage in the university of life and learn more than we were learning in a benign system. So, there's so much more to my journey of freedom in terms of personal experiences and challenges that I faced. For example, one of the things that I went through at a very young age, which, you pointed out, I should mention, is a car accident I had when I was 18. And it put me in a wheelchair for, I think, close to a year. And I couldn't walk. And I learned Reiki. And with Reiki, I actually healed myself out of a wheelchair. It was just an amazing experience to learn that we can heal ourselves, after spending so many months in hospital being pumped full of medication, learning this gift and learning that there's more to reality than what meets the eye. and learning this at a young age through my own experience, and then becoming empowered through it. Okay, so I've healed myself out of a wheelchair. What else can I do? So I also but never been one of these people that just accepts the status quo. And I don't like to be told this is the box, fit into it. These are your 3 options, pick one of them. I've always known that there's so much more out there. And one of the things I struggled with when I left university and wanted to go traveling was that we were always only geared towards potentially picking one career. And we've had to do that at a very young age, say the age of 17 or whenever you leave high school. And then you've got to decide then what it is you want to do with the rest of your life. Then you're going to go study, and that's what you're going to do. But hang on, you change so much, and you don't really know much about what is what in the world. How can you choose so young what it is you're going to be? And this, for me, was very frustrating because I really had an idea that I wanted to do a lot of different things in my life. From a young age, I always knew that there was never going to be one thing that would satisfy me for terribly long. And as a result, I've jumped around to many interesting careers, from public relations to sales and marketing, to working for L'Oreal as a key account executive, to being one of the most booked plus-size models in London, to TV presenting. And all of these things I'm now realizing have been part of this training ground to bring me to the point where I am now, that I've gathered all these skills and I'm able to do what I'm able to do. And all of it really is about now working and focusing on creating a better world. I'm so over the whole, MTV coma, cribs dream that people live in. In order to have that kind of a reality, there must be other people who are suffering. And I've realized that my children possibly couldn't hope to inherit a fair, just, peaceful, sustainable world unless that was an expectation for every child on the planet, which is why after 12 years of marriage, I've still not had kids. I've chosen to actually take up a life that is what I'd say ambitious activism towards this fair, just, peaceful, sustainable world. And that is what I'm choosing to do with my life now at this point. And that's taken me down many roads. I've been involved in so many different projects, and it's just been a very exciting experience. Sometimes I've been extremely disappointed. We've faced danger. We've had quite a few very interesting things happen to us. So a number of oh my goodness, experiences. And I think what a tremendous journey. I'm grateful every day for the fact that we've been able to do this, and that we are still able to do this, because it's not been easy. It's been a real challenge, but it's also brought a lot of richness to my life that you just can't get with wealth or luxury.
That's a very inspiring and interesting story. What I'm curious about now, Mel Ve isn't your legal name. Can you explain why you chose that name and the significance of using that name versus the name on your birth certificate, and also, if you can add on to that, what exactly happens behind the scenes when we're born and a birth certificate is issued in our name?
Well, just to let you know, Mel Ve isn't my illegal corporate fiction. It's a corporate fiction because corp means corpse as in dead. We're actually declared dead at the age of 7. And basically, we are, in fact, as you know, ourselves, corporate entities or trusts. And we're given a birth certificate with our corporate illegal fiction on it. My corporate illegal fiction, that would be the name or identity in my passport, is Melanie Spencer. When I started a Facebook page way back when, it was actually before I even started Freedom Central. And even then, before I properly started waking up, I just knew I didn't want to use any form of legal or illegal identity. And Mel Ve, V is just the first 2 letters of my married name. And my partner, his name's Richard, and he uses Rich V. So that's the reason we use that particular name. And together we run Freedom Central. And that's really why we've used that. And in terms of, what that means, it has given us a sort of public identity under that, and it keeps the legal fiction out of it, which has a lot of benefits. Once you start learning to not use your legal fiction, I know Kate of Gaia goes with I who shall not be named, and that's a path I recommend going, because when the minute you put some kind of capitis lettering onto something, you're automatically bonding it spiritually through writ. So, there's all of this aspect and element to it, which, of course, it just goes very, very deep. But why I've just chosen to use Mel V for most everything. And if there's anything more you want to know about that, we can get into that.
Well, mostly I was just interested in you sharing what actually happens within the system when we use our fictional name, and anything that you can do that would educate us about that, and your reason for choosing Mel V as opposed to some other name, which I think you've pretty much answered that. But if there's anything else you can add, then please continue.
Yeah, well, of course, your legal fiction, which appears on your birth certificate and on your driver's license and on your passport, is in fact a corporate entity against which you have a huge amount of money, which is levied as collateral. You are, in fact, owned and traded on a stock exchange. And your corporate collateral is what the country you were born in uses in order to get money traded in. So everybody is used as collateral, and we've all been building up as collateral in various parts of the world. There's 5 major collateral accounts. One of them is held by the Vatican. Another one is held by a corporation called the Swissindo World Orbit Trust. That's called Spiritual White Boy. So there's these various collateral accounts which have basically accumulated the value of humanity, which is represented by our birth certificate. And as far as I understand, a lot of that is in fact being diminished and collapsed with various movements such as OPPT and the letter that the Pope recently wrote. All these systems are being collapsed, and we're seeing now the crumbling of what was a very controlling, enslaving, mostly unbeknown to us. I mean, I don't think anybody knew that their birth certificate is actually a stock certificate. I mean, and you certainly don't grow up knowing that knowledge. So first off, understanding who and what you are and who and what you're not, which is, corporate legal fiction, I think is the most important point to start at for those going down this road. As you say, your audience being on the fringe, learn what you are and what you're not. And that's a good place to start. Start asking yourself the questions, who am I and what is my purpose here? There's possibly people who, wake up every morning and go, oh, I don't want to pay the bills today. Well, you actually, to be honest with you, you shouldn't have to, okay? It's only because you've been contracted into a system through your corporate legal fiction. Your parents at birth informed on you by registering you and then getting a certificate of exchange, okay, which is a birth certificate. You are now owned, and you were owned until the foreclosures with the Uniform Commercial Code by the OPPT. You were in fact owned by the system, and there are still a lot of people who are willingly and ignorantly still owned by the system because they allow themselves to be. There's so many ways now that are coming out. People are doing all this research, and there's wonderful movements coming out, educating people exactly how to free yourselves from, these binds that enslave us.
I actually just spoke with Kate yesterday, and we discussed some similar topics. And one of the things that she said was that when our birth certificate when we're born and we get a birth certificate, it's actually a debt that is added to our legal fiction entity, essentially. How does that compare to? Now, I know that the OPPT movement and some other related movements claim that there's actually it's more of like a bond that's issued, or something that has value that you can cash in. But Kate seems to have a different opinion. What do you think about that subject?
Actually, I'd love to talk to Kate more about that. It's something that interests me, and Kate's got a very interesting mind, slightly divergent in thought to the sort of alternative to the alternative media school of thought, which is interesting. I, for one, also have different views than Kate on certain things with regards to certain movements, but that's as much as I can say about that.
Well, I do want to talk about the letter from the Pope later, but I'm curious about, so you use this fictional or this name Mel V rather than using your fictional legal identity, but you still use your legal name on a passport. How does that work when you're mixing so many different? Obviously, we're in the transitional phase right now, and even speaking with Kate, I one of the questions I asked was well, where do you suggest people start on this journey? And she said essentially, take baby steps in that direction. You don't have to jump in with both feet. And at this point, is there a way to travel internationally without a passport that you know of?
We're all kind of working through these processes at the moment. What I will say is there are major projects underway which are working at getting rid of some of these unnecessary processes. It is at the moment difficult to travel without a passport. Simple fact is they will not let you into an airport unless you've got a passport. In fact, I don't think they'll let you leave an airport unless you've got a passport. So as it stands now, it's near enough impossible. We are unfortunately restricted in movement with travel, and it's something that in fact my number one bugbear with the entire enslavement system is the restriction on travel, because I have a South African passport, and with that you need a visa to go everywhere, and I've had to queue overnight in the freezing cold in the streets of London outside embassies to be one of the first 50 people in the queue, because they only give out 50 visas a day, to get a visa to go to a European country. It's just ridiculous. So yeah, for me, I really want to know how we're going to get around this one. But what I will say is I'm involved with a few projects that are actively working on solutions to this. So I don't think we're too far away from the complete dissolving of the need for these kind of documentation in order to travel. We should be free to travel and go wherever the hell we want. We're free beings, of this planet. We live on this planet. Who drew the line that said you allow this side of the line but not that side of the line unless you've got the right documentation? It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Now, I've heard a number of people in the sovereignty movement who have apparently somehow made themselves postmaster generals, and in doing so, they're able to travel internationally without a passport. Have you heard of that, or are you familiar with what that means exactly?
Yeah, James McBride's material. I'll be honest with you, I'm still working through it. The Postmaster General stuff is interesting, as is all the stuff with OPPT. I haven't actually myself looked into using any of that for travel documents, so I couldn't really comment much further on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even David Wynn Miller, have you heard of him?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, he tells it's kind of a funny story how he became a postmaster general, apparently anyway, and I'm not really sure. I haven't verified any of this, but he have you heard the story about how he, as a postmaster general, mailed his friend from one country to another using a postage stamp?
No, that's brilliant.
Yeah. Apparently, as a postmaster general, you can carry cargo with you where you go, and all it needs to have is a postage stamp. And so he was able to do this, apparently, and they gave him all kinds of grief at each customs, but they were able to get through it because once they validated his identity as a postmaster general, apparently that's all that was necessary. But I'm not exactly sure the dynamics of this or what it takes to become a postmaster general, and if you can even have more than one. And I know James McBride is also one, at least he says he is.
That's hilarious. Where do you stick the stamp? You post it on your forehead.
I'm not exactly sure, but it was, it's a funny story if nothing else. But I am curious about that myself, because it seems like a way that they've been able to circumvent this issue. But I'm not actually sure if you can have more than one postmaster general per country, but it is an area that I'm curious about researching further. Definitely keep me in the loop on what you find out about international travel, because I do that from time to time, and I'd like to find another way to do it.
Definitely one of my key focuses is freeing up international travel. Just, for me, it's a number one priority personally.
So to what extent do you function outside of the system? Do you have a driver's license? Do you pay your taxes? And how long have you been functioning outside of the system? Obviously, you work to make money somehow as well, and how do you do that while still being outside of the system?
Well, I'd like to say I don't pay taxes. Unfortunately, every time you buy something in a grocery store or anywhere else, you're paying tax. So yes, I still do pay tax. I don't have a driver's license. I do drive a car. Unfortunately, it is registered, but we will be deregistering it and putting on plates because we've just got the thing recently. Let's see, what else? We fly beneath the radar quite skillfully by moving around a lot, and make a point of not getting caught or having to appear in court. And I think that's the safest bet is the minute you stand in court, your rights are totally diminished. It doesn't matter what anybody tells you how to fight it. You get one judge who's having a bad day or doesn't like your face or actually feels that you're challenging his authority and he's got an ego. It doesn't matter what you come in with. That's you're toast. So that's how I go about it. It's just, fly beneath the radar. And, in terms of how my income, well, we had a little marketing business and media business for some time up until May. And then that was attacked after doing a series of interviews which exposed various high-profile, pedophiles, and that wasn't too cool. We lost near enough everything, and since then it's been a bit of a struggle. And it's not easy. We're I think 3 months behind on rent now, so that's kind of how it is at the moment. And 3 months behind rent in a legalized squatting building that it's like minimal of 250 euros a month. So it's not even like it's huge amounts either, but. Yeah, it's tough times to everybody. We do what we do with what we have, and we do it for the greater good of humanity. I know that times are changing, and it's just around the corner before we actually start seeing this whole lifting of oppression and poverty and suffering. So, to be honest with you, my situation may be dire, but I'm certainly pretty chipper.
Have you ever had any issues with the legal system or tax collectors or law enforcement as a result of not having or not using documentation? And if so, how have you managed to get around that?
To be honest with you, I've not, but simply because we've moved around a lot. We've been targeted right from the inception of Freedom Central. We were gassed after a conference and had all our media equipment taken. And so we, pretty hectic stuff, real guerrilla journalism type stuff. And how we've managed to sort of avoid all of it is just by moving around a lot. We move every 6 months and just fly beneath the radar in general, not just tax collectors and all that sort of stuff is the least we worry about. It's the other things that we're more concerned of, not just of physical nature, but also, astral attacks and things which seem to come when your light is bright. That's what they seem to be attracted to.
I'd like to, if you could, educate us as well as possible without us having a 4-hour interview about where would you say from your research do our tax dollars actually go, and is it any different for people in the United States where I'm based and a lot of our following is also based here? How would you answer that?
Well, I think tax money goes ultimately into the same pocket, into the same causes. It goes into the bullets and bombs that kill people. It goes into the vaccinations that sicken people. We know where that money is going, and it's not being used to make our lives better. Our money is used against us. Our sweat equity is used against us. It's not used to benefit us. And it's you. That's the same. That doesn't matter where you go. It doesn't matter what part of the world you're in. If you're paying tax, you're contributing to your own enslavement.
So I get this a lot. People who we talk about this who are new to the whole idea. The objection that I get is, well, who's going to build the roads and the bridges and so on if nobody pays their taxes? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the true privileges of my time as Freedom Central is the opportunity to obtain an interview with Jacques Fresco from the Venus Project. And Jacques Fresco and Roxanne Meadows have done some amazing work. And I think a resource-based society and his resource-based society model is one of the most viable out there, which I think is ultimately where we need to be heading. But ultimately, we still got to get there, and there's got to be a bridge between the reality now and where we're going to. And that, for me, is the big question mark. It's how do we get from one point to another and build an evolving structure with an ultimate aim, when actually, to be honest with you, by the time we get there, the whole thing could have evolved into something else. We don't quite know. It's a very, it's a complete paradox. I think that there's a lot of people out there selling ideas such as contributionism, Michael Tellinger from my home country in South Africa, which is a very naive concept. And I share the reasons why, is that for exactly what you've said in a lot of ways, like he says everybody should contribute to society, and that determines sort of how much value or wealth that you have. It's not about money. We have a contributions manifesto, and that's how everyone operates, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so who's going to want to contribute willingly to doing the dirty jobs, you know? Who's going to want to contribute to be the one who mops up, you know, puke on the floor in the nightclub, for example, or cleans the toilets? There are flaws in that. And yes, again, people ask, where does the money come from to build the roads? Well, in a resource-based economy and in an ideal world where you remove money and you remove fiat currency, we don't have to worry about the money to build them. We worry about the resources to build them. And on this planet, we have the resources to build anything we want. We can create anything we want. You just look around at what humanity has created, as flawed as we are. Look at what we have created. So, and that's with the binds and constraints of money. Imagine what we could be and do if there was absolutely no limit on resource. And we have an abundance on this planet in terms of resource. So that's my answer to that question is look at the bigger picture in terms of not just building bridges, but building a society.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So if somebody was looking at this and listening to this interview and they were thinking, all right, well, I want to step outside of the system, how would you suggest that they do that? Should they take baby steps or just jump in with both feet? And what would be the steps that you'd suggest that they would take to start out?
Sure. Well, I don't want to make suggestions to anybody. The reason being is because I think each individual person's journey to freedom is a rite of passage. You have to go through the experiences and peel through the layers at your own pace. Everybody evolves at their own pace. So what may work for one person may not work for another. And I know some people that this information is driven mad because they weren't ready to let go of that reality. And then there are some people who are just, so sick of the way things are that they're looking for something desperate. The type of people who was, spending night after night on the internet, searching for something that they couldn't quite put their finger on. And it was the same for me. I used to, when I lived in London, on the days that I wasn't working, and especially when it was cold, I didn't want to go outside, I'd sit in front of the TV and I'd flip from news channel to news channel, listening to the news to hear if there was anything that I was missing out, because I was convinced we weren't getting all of it, or the truth, or everything there was to know, whatever concept you want to use for that. But it was just this innate knowing that there must be more to this reality than what we're experiencing. Seriously, this can't be it. This can't be the point of it. And this is ultimately, I think, where I'm going to bring people to when I say the starting point for each and every person, I think, starts at a spiritual level. It starts with an understanding of knowing what your purpose is and trying to find and understand your purpose in life. I think is the most important thing for anybody to try and do. Without doing that and without having that fundamental orientation in place, it doesn't matter what else you discover, okay? Everything else is just noise and distraction. Find your purpose, and the information you need will synchronistically be brought to you. Get onto that purpose path. Do the work, dig deep, go through the fire. Do what you need to do to know what it is you are here to do. And we all made these decisions before we even incarnated. We all came here with a specific purpose. All of creation is purposeful, even the dark stuff. Even the dark stuff serves to evolve us. So we need to understand that we're not just existing. We have a purpose. We certainly did not get born to, get in the car, drive up the motorway, get into a glass and metal cage, photocopy, talk to a boss, stare at a screen. That is not the purpose of existence. So I'd say that's the best starting point. Once you've got that, the rest will come. The search for freedom, once you've found purpose, is an evolutionary next step.
Now, the sovereignty movement seems to be really picking up steam. There are a lot of people jumping into it, and there are quite a few people who are well known, some of which we've talked about today as well, like Kate of Gaia as well. And there's Jack Amara, who's in Australia, I think. Yeah. David Wynn Miller and Divine Province, OPPT, and so many others. They all seem to be one of the challenges that I've had, and we have a research team on our end who's working just in that field, trying to make sense of all these different parts and trying to put together a single system and approach that we can educate people with, that's reliable and easy to use. Do you have an opinion on any of these different things that are going on and the people who are involved in these different movements and
Yeah.
are any of them reliable? Or what can you say about any of that?
there is all sorts of stuff going on in the truth and sovereignty and freedom movement. It's just a case of, I think a lot of people are fighting on a lot of different fronts. And of course, everyone's got their own little island. They've got their own little invested ideas. They've spent so many years researching, going down that path. It's not like they want to get onto and turn around just in case they're wrong. But one of the most valuable things I've learned along this journey is every now and then just to routinely chuck everything out that I know, throw it away, and see what comes back to me. And so I don't take anything as the one way. Rather, I believe all of them have something to contribute. I'm very good friends with Heather Ann Tucci Giraffe. I've interviewed her several times, and she is really an amazingly spiritual and wonderful woman. And I think symbolically what she did with the OPPT and the UCC filings is amazing. I know Kate of Gaia thinks it's completely co-opted. I don't share his opinion. I'm personally working on a project at the moment which is working off the back of what has happened with his UCC filing. So I know that there has been some effect, there's some remedy with what was done there. And I think there needs to be a general coming together of people in this movement. There's far too much division, there's far too much separation, there's far too much infighting, even just within the organizations that I'm working in. Everyone's got their own little island, everyone's got their own little idea, and again, I'm not perfect, and I'm not blameless of sort of being directional and, thinking things should be one way and not another. So it's not pointing fingers or judging, but certainly we do need to pull together and start pooling our ideas and becoming a cohesive, organized think tank, because amongst all those things and peoples that you've mentioned are absolutely the perfect solution to free humanity.
Yeah, and I'd love to be a part of working with you to collaborate to figure that out, because we would love to take it out to our audience and the community in a way that they can understand, so that there aren't so many uncertainties. And a lot of these people we mentioned, they all seem to believe that their way sort of invalidates the other ways, which, I can understand. We all have our opinions, but that just causes more confusion for people, and if people don't know what to do, then they just don't do anything. So I think that's one of the things that I'm trying to get to the bottom of in our project here. So anything you ever can share with us as you figure these pieces out would be great. Now, I understand you recently released some information about the Swissindo. I'm curious about the timing of that, and also a lot of people may not even know what that is. So can you go into it with a little bit of depth, explain what the Swissindo is and how the current development will impact the world and each individual person?
Okay, big question. Swissindo. Let's deal with Swissindo first. To my understanding, I'm giving it to you in the best words that I can. Swissindo is an organization which basically is headed up by a gentleman by the name of Mr. Sino. He's not just a gentleman, he's actually known as the King of Kings, the 681st King of Kings of a line of servant kings. I mean, that's a very ancient royal bloodline in Indonesia. And he's what is known as M1. And if you check out godskyeth.org and you go into the documents, there's a document there called The History of Asian Banking. And I sincerely suggest that people take a look through it, because it'll give you an indication as to where Mr. Sino ties in on a historical perspective, because obviously a lot of history has been changed and altered, and this gives a good idea as to how this aspect of history ties into our current affairs. And basically, Mr. Sino, I think he owns either between 14 and 17%. I think it's either 14 or 17% of the world's gold. Now, that's a hell of a lot of gold. And again, if you want to see the proof of this, feel free to check it out on godskyeth.org. I've made several clips which come from the vaults themselves of the gold and cash and all the reserves there. So it's not even hypothetical. We've got the evidence of it. It's there. It exists. And basically what happened was Swissindo came into the public's attention when, of course, Heather Giraffe Tucci and the trustees of the One People's Public Trust, they foreclosed on the whole financial legal system supposedly on the 25th of December 2012 with the UCC filings, which again, there's a lot of speculation and questioning from me around that. Nonetheless, the premise was that Heather turned around and said everybody is entitled to $10 billion. And of course, she never manifested $10 billion for anybody. A couple of people wrote to her asking her to please, pay her out their $10 billion. So what did she do? She collapsed the trust. But prior to collapsing the trust, we had a gentleman, Mr. Sino and Swissindo, come into the picture, and they go, okay, we can't do 10 billion per person, but we can do 6 billion. And we can create the bridge between what you're proposing, Heather, which is trading in eternal value and essence, which we all have. Okay, we are the value. We should be trading in energetic value as opposed to like theoretical liability on paper or illegal fiat tender or currency. But how do we build the bridge between what we're doing now and, say, working in a paradigm where we're trading in energetic value? There's got to be some kind of path between the two. I mean, it's what I call the synapse syndrome. When two nerves, just as they meet, they don't actually touch. There's a little area between the two nerves, which is called the synapse. And it's in those synapses where you really have to pay special attention. I called it the synapse, really, of this is what is going to happen between what we've got now, which is a corrupt system that's falling apart and being exposed as fraudulent with every step we take, and whistleblowers coming out all the time. And then obviously we all now are starting to look at solutions. There's beautiful people bringing out some wonderful ideas, and how do we get to that? And this is what Mr. Sino and Swissindo represent, is they stepped up and provided the means for us to build that bridge between the two paradigms, which we didn't have before, which is very necessary if you want to move from one to the other. So they're a massive organization that are tied in with so many other organizations, which, if you are into sort of what you want to term conspiracy research, you would consider them to be the bad guys. And this is where the lines get slightly blurred for people. Swissindo is intrinsically tied into the United Nations. Now, people are going, oh, United Nations, that's the bad guys. Well, I've worked with so many different people who are working on projects for global redevelopment. And I tell you, there's a hell of a lot of good people working in the United Nations. There is a very thin sliver of technocracy, which is being weeded out. And there is a definite split going on. I mean, there are signs all over the show. There's split information coming out about the Pentagon as well, being split between the two factions. It's all over the show. You just keep your eye to the sort of alternative media news mill, and you start to see the signs of all of these. Okay, right. There are people within these organizations that now go, now is the time to jump because we now have the means to do so. And there are these very apparent splits happening. So we've got good guys now working on our side in these organizations, which is good. We needed to repurpose these organizations that had these networks across the world for redevelopment. In the past, these networks have been used or misused by doing things like distributing vaccinations, which don't help anybody. So we need to repurpose these networks into positive things. And this is one of the great things about this bridge is it's given us that step into a big organization that has the networks in place for us to go out and change the world. We didn't have the resources or the networks in place. And we're trying to work with what we got in terms of existing networks by repurposing them under, what we call the CVAC system. So that is Swissindo. Swissindo effectively set up what is known as the first CVAC, Creation Value Asset Center, in the form of God, Sky, Earth. It is the parent CVAC, which will then feed every other CVAC. And we are also probably going to be changing the word CVAC so it's simpler for people to understand. But it is the fund. It is the fund that is represented by Swissindo Exhibits AB, which basically lay out 11 payments which cover global redevelopment and distribution of a huge amount of funds with a total amount of 6 million going back to each and every person on the planet. So it's a pretty exciting project to be involved with, and it's just absolutely huge.
What's the time frame you're anticipating for this to actually happen? Do you have any concrete information as to a rollout of this?
It's imminent, and I hate using that word because we are quite literally only weeks away from actually meeting with Mr. Sino directly. So I don't think it's going to be terribly much longer. We've had several delays because obviously when Mr. Sino decided, all right, I'm releasing the global collateral accounts, it had to go through several banks, went through the Commerce Bank, the Big Bullion Bank, and everywhere along the line there were holdups. This money's supposed to have been released already. We're supposed to be out there rolling this out already. And we're now in the final phases of getting through the last few hurdles that we have to get through to get these funds released. But the funds are definitely there. I personally have gone through all the payment transaction documents along with my partner, and we've done fastidious research to make sure where the funds are being held up, see where the funnel necks were, and it's there. The money's there. The paperwork's in place. The payments and transfers have all been made. It's just waiting for them to get into the various accounts. And that's what's taking the time. You can imagine this is one of the biggest releases of funds in human history. So obviously there's a lot of questions being asked and a lot of people who are very unhappy about this. So they're doing what they can to dig their heels in and make it as tough as they possibly can. And a good example is when I first got involved with the delegation, I was up in arms about the fact that Angela Merkel had been given a place on the delegation, which she is no longer. But in order for her to, stop her little block that she had insisted on at the Commerce Bank, the only way to do that was to say, okay, well, if you take the block away, we'll put you on the delegation. And kind of that's what they did. But she never ended up being on there permanently. So, I was like, oh, I don't want to be involved in anything Angela Merkel's involved with because, she's known as the Holy Roman Empress. So, as the Chancellor of Germany. So there's a lot of things that are, just to give you an idea of, it's pretty serious stuff here. And there's big people sticking their heels in trying to hold this up because it really is. This is the empowerment of the whole of humanity beyond anything we currently know.
Can you illustrate, you've already talked about it a little bit, but can you illustrate how exactly, if you know at this point, how exactly is this money that is allotted for each individual person going to make its way to each individual person?
There is a delegation that has been set up. It's supposed to be representative of the 5 continents. I'm a delegate for the African delegation, and it's meant to be 100 people. And the idea is that these 100 delegates will be ultimately responsible for the redistribution of funds through various project networks. We've been working for the last 5 months. Myself, I've been working on this project for the last 5 months with people day in, day out, working on setting up systems, going, okay, so an example, if we do, for example, manage to get all these guys, what are we going to do with them? Are we going to try them? Are we going to send them to prison? Do we want to create the old paradigm of taking people's freedom away and imposing suffering on them? Or do we want to try and rehabilitate them? It's all these things which we've had to reconsider. If we're going to create a new world, what world is that going to be? And it's taken many hours, many meetings over the last 5 months with people all over the world, different time zones, up at 2 and 3 in the morning. My day sometimes for like weeks on end started at 3 a.m. with a meeting with America, and then went on through to a meeting with Australia, then went on through to a meeting with Africa. And then, of course, there was the Americas that night, and catching sleep in between meetings. And we really are looking at building the systems of how we're going to redistribute those funds. But it's not only that, we're trying to get a banking system that's outside the existing system so that you don't have this money going straight back into the hands of the people who want it. Okay. And also we're trying to set up what we call external registries. So you can register your properties sort of outside the country. And a good example of this is if you, for example, take your car from England to France. In France, they've got no jurisdiction over your car because your car is registered in England. So we're trying to work out what we call the equivalent of offshore registries or inter vivos trusts, where the money can actually be deposited and registered, your belongings, without it being able to be touched by the existing system. So we've got a huge team and an amazing network of legal minds and system builders and solutions-orientated people who are working on this problem and working on getting solutions into place to make sure that, first off, that the rollout of money actually does get to the end users, and that it doesn't end up back in the hands of the cabal. Because one of the problems we looked at was if we did take all the funds from all the elite and we redistributed them across the world, in 10 years' time, they would actually have all that money back just because of the way the system is geared and materialism and advertising if we didn't change the fundamental thinking patterns of people on the ground. So with this entire rollout of funding comes a huge education initiative as well. And I guess this is where my role comes in because I'm involved with media. And the media side of things is hugely important because media is education. Education really, and media can't really be separated. except now media is used mostly for indoctrination. Ideally, we'd like to repurpose the whole media paradigm into educational purposing, rather than for what it is now, it's pure, indoctrination and distraction. So there is a whole huge thought process, a whole massive think tank behind this. It's not just a case of, oh, give us a bunch of money and we're going to throw it at people. There is a whole considered, measured, studied, systematic approach to this. It's not going to be something that we just jump into.
So you mentioned there were 110 people in this delegation, right?
Oh, it's 100 people. It's 5
100
continents.
people, okay.
Yeah, 5 continents. Each delegation has 20 people.
Okay, and was there a reason for that, the selection of that many people only, and what was the criteria for choosing these people? Why were you chosen also?
I don't know what the criteria was for choosing a lot of them. I'll be honest with you. I've asked that question with regards to some of the delegates that are there, because to be honest with you, I don't know why some of them are there. They just seem to be placeholders. The reason I was chosen, I don't know. I guess because of the work that I do, I'm very humanitarian focused, and I guess I really have a deep invested interest into what happens in Africa, being from Africa and having seen the poverty and suffering there firsthand. It's something that's never left me. It's something I've always focused on. Before I was involved with the delegation, I wrote my book, The South African Guide to the Global Conspiracy, and I also made a film called The Last of the Boers, raising awareness about many issues in South Africa. So for me, Africa's my heart. It's my soul. I get off the plane every time I go home and I quite literally kiss the ground. I don't care how dirty it is. It's just, I can feel that the energy that goes through me when I'm home. And no matter where I travel, if I never go back there, it'll always be with me. And I guess that's one of the reasons, with all the activism I've been involved with, raising awareness about various issues in Africa, I was selected by the people who were putting together the delegation at the time. I didn't even know about the delegation. I was actually approached and offered a position on it. So I don't know what the selection criteria was, because I'm very unique in what we do. So I don't think everyone had the same criteria as me. I guess they just kind of saw me as someone good with media, a voice, and a potential candidate for the African delegation. I'm not sure exactly what my criteria was or what the criteria for other people are. Most certainly, when I started to assist in helping to put delegates in place when that became necessary, my criteria was most certainly to have people who have the same fundamental orientation as we were establishing, which is being totally in service to others, understanding that this is not about the money, this is about creating a new reality, and they also had to have a pretty good knowledge of the way the world works, how it really works, not the way we taught it works. So those are my fundamental criteria. I don't know what it was when it first started out.
You mentioned a little about Mr. Sino. Can you go more in depth into his background, his family's lineage, and why is he doing this? I mean, what exactly are his motivations?
Yeah, sure. Right. Well, there's a lot of speculation and rumor out there about Mr. Sino, that he's a channeled entity and stuff. And well, he's not. He's a flesh and blood human being. The lineage, again, I refer you to the document called The Brief History of Asian Banking on GodSkyEarth.org. It's probably the most comprehensive understanding you'll get of Mr. Sino and his lineage, and where he all fits in. Why is he doing this? I think genuinely he's a good person. From what we've understood, there's been a lot of problems whilst working on the delegations, and the correspondence we've had from Indonesia with regards to sorting out some of these problems has shown me that this man has only the highest spiritual intent, and has the best wishes for humanity. And this is not the first time he's tried to do this. In fact, if you go through those documents, the history of Asian banking, you'll see it was actually just over 50 years ago, where they talk about the meeting at the Green Hilton, where JFK was actually going to work with Mr. Sino to do the project that we're doing now. And guess what? He was killed. So there's a lot of reasons. We all know that it was Executive Memorandum 1110, which basically said about the process of abolishing the Federal Reserve, and that was signed off by Kennedy. And of course, he was killed. And part of what he was going to do was bring out this gold-backed currency. Guess where it came from? It came from Mr. Sino. So there's been many attempts in the past to do this, right? And now the opportunity has come again for us to do it. And here we are, a bigger group of us, and working to a structure and a plan that Mr. Sino and his people have been working on for many, many, many years. And so far, to me, it seems the most logical, what we call path or synapse or bridge to the next step. So yeah, that's what I think he's doing. I think he generally sees an opportunity here to, there's people actually stepping up and foreclosing, opportunity to get the money out to the people without it being taken up because the system's foreclosed. I think he was somewhat naive in that, like the rest of us at the time OPPT started, because it's not all it's cracked up to be honest with you. But nonetheless, Sino's kept to his promise. I'm going to give back $6 million to everybody in human obligation funds, and then some to each and every country for global development as well. So, he's got more than he'll ever need. He's got warehouses full of gold. You can't eat gold, He's got more than he will ever need. So he's decided to give some of it back. And to be honest with you, the kings and queens and elites of the West could certainly take a page out of his book, as far as I'm concerned. So whether he's a king of kings or whether he was a street sweeper, I think what he has done is absolutely amazing. And a lot of people have umbrage with the fact that he's a king and there's titles involved. Now, I don't care what your titles are. Your soul intent is shown in your deeds. And again, back to why is he doing this? From my interactions with him and his people in Indonesia, well, I have not spoken with him directly, but through his assistants and various people around him, one of the things that I have fathomed is this man has really got the best intent. Just the way he's dealt with situations, people who've been thrown off the delegation by coordinators on the delegation just for personality clashes. He didn't let them be thrown off. He created a separate council for them, a sixth council above the five called the Cabinet Council. And he created a separate council for them so that they could go in there so nobody would be left out. And to me, that just shows where the heart and soul of this man is, which is in complete love, understanding, tolerance, and forgiveness, which is really what we need to be working on if we're going to be creating a better world, because that really is what is lacking.
I want to go back to your comment about he's not a channel entity. So if he's not a channeled entity, what is this information out there that's floating around about him being a channeled entity? Where did that come from, and what is the significance of that?
Oh, again, this is Heather Tucci Giraffe, Brian Kelly crew, Dee from Breaking the Shackles. They're all friends, and they're friends of mine too, and I love them all dearly. But they've not necessarily been the supportive of this endeavor. Dee's comments are that why 6 million? We're entitled to 10 billion. Well, Mr. Sino doesn't have 10 billion. He's doing what he can with something real, not just our energetic value, something people can understand here and now to get us to that next bridge where we can work in energetic value. So there's been a lot of criticism towards this from the very people who actually started this project. They've not been very supportive. So this is really, to be honest with you, where all this rubbish rumor comes from. It's from these very people who actually were involved with OPPT, and they're now actually putting out a lot of disinformation about Mr. Sino being a channeled entity and stuff, because this is where it all comes from, removing the shackles or breaking the silence. What Dee's got those blogs, Brian Kelly's blog, American Kabuki, and of course they all work together. And they're Heather's sort of mouthpiece. And anything Heather wants to put out, she sends it to those guys and they'll publish it. And so this is, where the rumors come from. But it's certainly not true. I've got photos of Mr. Sino. We speak with people every day who speak to him daily kind of thing. So he's a real person, flesh and blood.
So you're one of the delegates for Africa, and so is Heather, right? So
yes.
Said, okay. And Heather was offered the title of Queen of Africa. Can you explain the significance of that title, and why did she turn it down, and anything else you want to add regarding that?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, there were titles given to the people within the various delegations. There were 3 titles which have been given as honorary titles. We've been given, there's a title of Prime Minister, there's a title of CEO, Chief Executive Officer, and a monarch for all the delegations, okay, for all the, actually, to be honest with you, I've not yet come into contact with the European delegation or the Asian delegation. When I'm saying this, I'm talking about there are these 3 titles for the Americas, Africas, and Australia delegation. Okay, in the Australias, you've got a prime minister and a CEO and an emperor. All right. In Africa, we have a prime minister and a CEO. And Heather was the one who Sino wanted to be the Queen of Africa because she lives in Morocco. But Heather is not African. And when she was offered this title, she just quite simply said, no titles define me, kind of thing. And this is obviously what the information that she released last week onto American Kabuki and everything, where she let out the flow chart, which has all of our names on it, shows where our positions are in the various delegations. So it's now public knowledge. So of course now, obviously everyone wants to talk to me about Swissindo and what's going on in my part in the delegation. And at the time I was in careful negotiations with Heather on behalf of the folks at Swissindo and on behalf of Mr. Sino to try and get Heather to accept the Queen of Africa title and come with us to meet Mr. Sino. But Heather, unfortunately, never really had the very best of intentions for this project. To be honest with you, it just seems from the very beginning that not necessarily just her, but from her media cronies, have done nothing but try to sabotage the Swissindo project, which, to be honest with you, out of all the things that supposedly came out of OPPT or Postmaster Generals, or all these other things going around, to me, it's the most tangible, real solution, okay? We've seen the proof of the bank transfers. We've seen the money, the evidence of it in the vaults, okay? The gold. We know that this stuff is real. It's not just pie in the sky, okay, fill in a form and hope for the best, post your mate through an airport kind of thing. That's all very significant, but what we want is actual change. And this is what Sino is offering. Can you imagine? Now look at half the world's population lives on $2 a day. Could you imagine the energetic shift in this planet when suddenly those 2 million, those half the world's population, okay, no longer lives on $2 a day, but can actually lift themselves out of poverty. All right, just think about the huge impact that would have. Half the population on $2 a day, okay, suddenly not having that circumstance anymore. I mean, the energy vibration of this planet will just shift exponentially to the point where we are moving towards a 5D paradigm, where those people become educated. They're no longer stupefied by poverty. They get the opportunity to learn, okay, unlearn that we're worth nothing and learn that the value lies with us. We are the value. We create the value, and therefore we can trade in our own value. We don't need something external to us. We don't need theoretical liability on paper, fiat tender. But in the meantime, what we do need is something between that and the eternal value. And that, again, is where Sino comes in with something that's not fiat currency. It's gold-backed. Not ideal, but still better than what we currently have. And it's real. It's not just money printed out of thin air. It's actually backed by something, which I think when you're talking to the average guy in the street, I think it'd be better for them to understand, look, the new financial system we're trying to set up is actually backed by gold. It's not money that's made up from a fractional reserve banking system. That, I think, goes down better than all of a sudden, okay, so we're not going to be using money. And by the way, your house is not worth anything, and the car and everything you've earned, that's not worth anything. You're just going to, everything that you've worked for is worth nothing. You're going to have to start trading in essence, in your eternal essence. Now, trying to sell that to the average person in the street is a lot harder to sell. But once you've got everybody up to speed, and you can do that with an educated population, you can only educate a population if those people can be educated because they can reach media, they can afford it. So it starts with, okay, the very lowest level of the most basic needs, which is to be housed, to be fed, to be clothed, to have your health looked after, to have some basic education so that you can make informed decisions. So this is really where we're going to be starting with these projects, and we've had to think very carefully about how we want to put it together, and how we're going to be rolling this out. It's not just something we're going to be jumping into, and we've had to be honest with you, very, very little support from Heather Tucci Giraffe and her people. In fact, as I say, a lot of unfortunate disinformation. And when Heather released those documents last week, I was mortified because there are private conversations between her and I, which I got an upfront contract from her. I said, this is confidential, please. Obviously, this is between you and I. And she's published them in the public domain. So she's acted out of honor, which, for someone like Heather I think is quite astounding. But nonetheless, it's out there now. Everybody knows. My Skype conversation with Heather out there. It's very, all she had to do was say, no, I don't want to accept the title. She didn't have to put all this information out there, but she's not accepting the title. And to be honest with you, I don't completely blame her. I don't agree with the title situation. I actually was in the position of becoming the CEO of Africa. And I turned it down. I actually said to the delegation not to vote for me and to give those votes to somebody else who's taken up that position. Not been very successful in that position either. But nonetheless, all these titles actually have done within the delegations is create a lot of division, is create a position for people to abuse their powers, and it's been a microcosm of what we see in the bigger world. So actually, in one respect, I understand why Heather has turned it down, but it was the way she went about it is actually just very disrespectful. And I think considering Mr. Sino's gift to humanity, the very least she could have done is perhaps given him a call and said to him, no, thanks, I won't be taking it, because, she's also going to be on the receiving end of 6 million when it all comes rolling out. So, I'm torn between what is right and what is wrong here, and perhaps there isn't one, it just is. But Heather, certainly turning down the title, I think on a moral grounds is great. There was talk within the delegations, of course, since Heather's turned down the title, who do they give the title to? The delegates wanted to vote for somebody, and then it came from Mr. Sino, actually, the delegation cannot do that. Mr. Sino is the only person who can give titles out, and they're honorary titles to be given out. And so it is up to Mr. Sino to give those titles out. There have been a number of very strong delegates, including myself, who've made it very clear that we don't agree with the titles, that I certainly won't be accepting any titles. I don't want any titles necessarily. I don't believe in them. I believe we're all equal people. We're all here to do a job. And unless those titles are actually job descriptions, functional, then really, why do we have them? Why do we have honorary titles? It has actually proven in the delegation that they've just caused more trouble than anything, because they're not functional titles. They're just given to people and told they're honorary. You don't have a function, but still they're abusing their positions within the delegations. And it's become very obvious, and it's a problem we're trying to sort out at the moment. So, again, I agree with what Mr. Sino's done in wanting to reward certain people and have certain people in executive council, so you don't have to call the whole 100 delegates together for a meeting. You can call 3 people from each of the delegations to meetings, which is maybe a little less overwhelming for the people who hold in the meetings or whatever. Have representatives from each council, which is the executive council, which would be your monarch, your prime minister, and your CEO. I get all the need for that. Get the representatives. And Mr. Sino has laid it out that it's actually, the structure isn't a pyramid structure. It's not a hierarchy. It actually, the way I like to think of it, is more like a spider web that's flat and sort of radiates out from the center, as opposed to going up and down in a pyramid. And it is a spider web because every piece holds each other together. Once one thread is broken, it weakens the whole web. So you do need to have that central point of something, working from, and not all power in one set of hands, but certainly a central point of working, then radiating out. And I use this example of people saying, how do you get around this whole title thing, and how do you reconcile that with trying to create a new world where everyone's equal? Well, I try to put it this way. Yes, we're all equal, but we're not all the same. Some people have leadership skills. Some people are better designers. Some people are better builders. Just like in the human body, you cannot only be made of hearts. You need a heart, you need a liver, you need lungs, you need a head. And most animals who are, on all 4 legs, the head is the thing that comes around the corner first. They are led by the head, their eyes. So in any organization, in order for it to function like a well-oiled organ or body, okay, there needs to be some kind of spearheading direction. Now, that spearheading direction doesn't have to be autocratic. It can take advice of the entire delegation, but there needs to be a point of, okay, the head of the animal, so to speak, that leads the body to walk somewhere. Otherwise, what you've got is you've got a 10-headed animal trying to rip the body in all different directions, and that doesn't work. So again, it's a paradox, really, moving from one paradigm to another, where you've got a world of hierarchy with people with titles and compartmentalized and, structure, and we're trying to get away from that. How do we get away from that? Moving to a new world, getting rid of all those titles, but somehow still having an organic working body. Well, again, as well, we've got the whole, Mr. Sino's got this ancient lineage and traditions and heritage, which they wish to kind of try and preserve with what he's creating, and he wishes to bestow honorary titles. How are we going to tell this guy who's given this amazing gift to humanity, no, we don't want your titles, and actually we just choose to ignore your tradition and your heritage? We can't do that. So it's a simple compromise down the middle, which is those are the people who've been given the titles need to take self-responsibility. They themselves need to be, like Mr. Sino, servants of the people, not rulers of the people. They themselves need to set the examples of how to be, not be the perpetrators of the ill deeds, which unfortunately we're seeing a little bit now of in the delegations. But again, I keep coming back to what we're seeing now, working with this amazing think tank, trying to create all of this going forward, is a microcosm of what's going on out there. And in working through all these issues, we are realizing that if we don't get it right at this level, okay, we can't hope to get it right on a bigger level. And it's not perfect. The program at the moment is hugely flawed. We are absolutely working to try and shoe up all the holes and find solutions for absolutely everything, get working systems into place, common law procedures, absolutely everything you can imagine to make it a fair, just, peaceful, sustainable society going forward.
Obviously, human beings still have egos, and to varying degrees. And I understand why Mr. Sino would want to impart these titles, these honorary titles, even if they don't have so much function. Obviously, that's his background, and maybe that's just the way that he thinks. But if these titles give the individuals the power to represent a particular region, then there is some kind of power or influence that they have guiding the direction that the overall vision goes, right? So if, at least that's my understanding from what you're saying, and if that is the case, do you think that you're taking a risk by Heather and you and whoever else by turning down these titles and allowing it to go to other people who you don't know where their heart really is?
Oh, that's Ethan. Yeah, you're such a great journalist. That is an amazing question. And yes, 100%. We've already seen it happen. I'm regretful not taking the CEO title now, having seen what a mess our current CEO of Africa has made of it. So, I did the honorable thing because I didn't want to have titles. I myself, my goal really is I want to change global media, and this is the opportunity I had and I've been presented with here, was at the actual chance to perhaps do that. I certainly never wanted to be sitting on a throne holding a scepter, and a crown. In fact, at one stage it was offered, the position was potentially put to me, if Heather doesn't take it, you might be, Mel, you might end up getting this position. I'm like, tell you what, you give me that crown, I'll shove it up your ass. I was like, I don't want it. It's not something I'm terribly comfortable with, and yet some of the people who have been put into those positions who are quite happy to wear those titles, again, I think it's the ego, and they've turned out to be quite mischievous with what they've done, some of the things they've done because they have these titles. I wasn't to judge or point fingers or draw any of the sort of delegation politics out into the public forum. But yes, there is a hell of a lot of abuse of power going on because people suddenly think that they've got a title that they can do what they like. And we are trying to sort this out because this is unfortunately the programming based upon what we've been subjected to in everyday society. And it's trying to break those old residual patterns of behavior and trying to get people to release the ego. And that title does not define you. It's merely an honorary title. It's not even a functional title. It's not even a job description, Trying to get that through to them is another thing. So to answer your question, yeah, I do think that because people like Heather and I turn these things down, that there are potentially people, and we've seen it already, getting into these positions and abusing them. And, it's unfortunate, but it's a catch-22. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
And you get some sort of compensation, do you not, for accepting a title?
No, there's no more money as far as I'm aware. There's no additional mandate whatsoever other than you've been honored.
I see. Okay, you mentioned earlier about the ability to register a car that's been transported from one country to another. I'm curious because there is a lot of movement going on within the whole sovereignty idea, and that idea is sort of moving away from registration. Why is registration necessary to move a car from one country to another in this future that you're envisioning?
Well, it's not necessary. Most people don't even register. As you know, regis means the king, and stir, divine feminine, a sacred feminine. It's giving everything over to the king. Or the monarch, and there is no need to register. But what we're talking about is creating a whole system that's separate. Okay, And what I was referring to there earlier is, as I said, anything outside of jurisdiction can't be touched, as you know. An example of is a diplomat falls under international law, and that is why a diplomat gets diplomatic immunity. Because they're out of the jurisdiction of that country's law. They fall under UN international law and therefore can't be touched by the police, even if they kill someone, kind of thing. All right, that's so long as they're not in their own country. They've only got those rights in other countries. And guess what? It's the same for a car. As I said, if I go from England to France, in France, they can give me a parking fine, but they can never enforce it. They can never take my car away from me. They can just quite simply put the fine on my window and hope that I pay it. They never really can come from me because the car is actually registered in a completely different country, and it doesn't fall under the jurisdiction of the country where that fine was issued. So it's not enforceable. And this is it, is that one of the best ways, if you want to fly beneath the radar, is quite literally buy your car and register it in another country and drive it in another country. They will say to you, you have a year or whatever to change the plates or a certain period of time or to change over your license. But to be honest with you, it's very difficult to keep track of all of that and for them to come and chase you down. And if anybody ever stops you, you just say, hey, I just arrived, kind of thing. You know, that is one of the easiest ways, particularly if you're living in, places where you've got a lot of small countries together, you can do this sort of thing. And again, I use the best example is England and Europe. A lot of people have their cars registered in England, come drive them in Europe. And they can't be touched by the European authorities or any of the local authorities here, because their car is actually registered in another country. It's the property of another country. So again, setting up these, taking this into account, looking at the historical actions of what we call offshore accounts, where people put their money in offshore accounts so it can't be touched by the tax man. It works on the same premise. Okay, if your money's in another country, it can't be touched by where you are supposed to be taxed from. So this is what we're looking at. It's the same premise that we're setting up now, is these registries that are outside the country. And you don't have to register anything. But what we do need to look at realistically is external systems of moving value around. And there will need to be some kind of registry of value in order to be able to move this value around between people. So that is where those external registries and the idea of that comes from.
I'd like to go into the sovereignty idea a little bit and how it relates to this. I'm curious, does the success of this Swissindo initiative require more people to be sovereigns or not? Is there any relationship at all? And also, let's assume that somebody is a sovereign and they don't have any kind of registration within the system. How is it you're going to keep track of giving out this money to each individual if they don't have any kind of a registration?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And these are all sort of microcosmic problems that we're going to have to deal with down the line. We're not quite there yet. We're still dealing with a whole bunch of structural issues much further up. No, you don't have to be sovereign. I think the most important thing is just to be present. Each person take responsibility for themselves. There's various many ways that people are going about freeing themselves, but it doesn't impact at all on your allotment that'll be coming from Swissindo.
Now that this has been revealed, what time frame do you anticipate we'll see actual concrete results? I think you said earlier on that it would be very soon, but can you give, and you may not know this yet, but can you, from what you do know, give sort of an idea of the kind of things we can expect to see in the near future and at what time frame?
Well, we're starting to see things now already. I mean, supposedly America's bankrupt. We're watching huge movements of funds, and if you know what's going on, and the various people like Martin Blessing at the Commerce Bank, and you watch his movements in the newspapers and stuff, you begin to understand what's going on behind the scenes. There's a lot of talk in the and I will go into this here because there's a lot of talk in the alternative media about this being the White Dragon Society that's involved with this, which is not true. Well, we actually, to be honest with you, I don't know that 100% confirmed, but Benjamin Fulford talks about the White Dragon Society and how he's in touch with them and stuff like that. And from what I've understood, this is not the White Dragon Society that we're involved with. This is something completely different. There's a huge amount of money being moved from Asia into the West, and the time frame when the Asian people They've taken a long time to get this out, and they're kind of just going at the pace. They're different to us. They're different in the way they approach things. They believe that in time God will make everything right, as opposed to us Westerners that want everything done yesterday. So it's taken a bit of time to roll out. As I said, it's imminent that we'll be meeting Mr. Sino. I mean, quite literally gotten down to the stages of they've got our passport details for tickets, for plane tickets and stuff like that. It's that close. And once that has happened, we'll obviously have met up, had the meetings, understand more about our mandate and how we are to work with getting the funds out. No, it's going to be great to have entire delegation together. It's been difficult working across time zones and meetings on various chat platforms to try and organize this thing. You can never really ever get anybody together because we're all in such varied time zones. So right now it depends on the meeting. Once that meeting is done, I'd say it's as soon as that happens that it's going to be rolled out. So that meeting is literally weeks away, a couple of weeks maybe max, 3-4 weeks. And then once that happens, we'll be coming back and getting the value to start getting into the places that it needs to get to make the most changes on the ground level. And of course, being an African delegate, I promise you I'm going to be on the ground level myself, personally making sure that that food gets to those hungry mouths and those people without homes are getting their shelter. That's absolutely my number one priority.
Well, it's interesting what you said about the U.S. bankruptcy. I mentioned when we talked before that I've been studying astrology for quite a while, and one of the things that I've seen coming for some time is 2014 would be essentially either a bankruptcy or a complete restructuring of the United States. And so what you're doing is really very timely because we're headed to that time now to where there is going to be some kind of major financial restructuring. What do you see if this initiative moves forward as I imagine it will? How do you expect it to impact the current banking and financial system? And would you anticipate market panic, or is there something inherent or built into the rollout of this that will stabilize and prevent that?
We're trying our hardest to make sure those mechanisms are there. We understand hugely that there could be mass panic. But again, you know what I've done with media? I stuck out videos. Please don't panic. They will tell you there's not enough to go around, but they're lying. We have a plan, here it is. And if you've checked out the website, godscope.org, there's 6 videos there, and there's one called What Would You Do? What would happen? And I made that. And really, it's like saying to people, don't panic. There is a solution. We're working on it. Whatever you do not go mad, do not go ballistic, because, there might come a time when the whole economy does crash. And then what do we do? Don't worry, there is a plan and we're working on it. It's all there. So, yeah, we're trying our hardest to say, don't panic. Things are changing and we are working on making it better for the whole of humanity. Apart from that, we can't really predict how 7.4 million or however many people now live on this planet, how they're going to be reacting to all of this. This is possibly the most exciting adventure to be involved with, because there are so many variables. We actually don't know the ultimate outcome. We don't actually know if we're going to be successful in what we do, but it's the greatest opportunity that's ever been presented. And I'm just so glad and honestly, truly privileged to be a part of this. It's been one hell of a slog working with the delegations over the last few months. Tears, dramas, just unbelievable stuff. But it's been a massive growing process as well. And, I'm optimistic, and I think it definitely has a good chance of working, just because it's the most real thing I've seen today. Being an investigative journalist, I work with facts, not conjecture, and so this is really where we're trying to work out the solutions, not to have people falling into that negative downward spiral of panic, but rather have them realize that there are solutions in place and they should go spiraling up in anticipation and excitement, because for the first time in humanity's history, we're actually going to be completely financially free. It's a huge freaking thing. It's huge. So yeah, how to work out will people panic? We don't know. We're trying. As I say, education and media is huge, and that's where I'm involved. We're trying to get that message out there to people, trying to say, look, things are going to collapse. They are, because it's just not sustainable. But don't worry, there is a backup plan. It's in place. It's more in place than most people realize. So yeah, I guess that's probably the best we can do. It really comes down to education, and of course, wonderful people like yourselves who get this message out to people. So as much of that as we can do in educating and making people aware that there is stuff coming, and just support us. Don't hinder us. You know, we're here, we're on your side, and we really are trying to work this out for the betterment of humanity.
It sounds like you got your work cut out for you. What can we do as individuals and community leaders to take advantage of this opportunity? And is there some way that we should be looking to get involved and to help move this forward?
Absolutely. Everybody needs to be looking towards this now, because it is the most tangible solution we have now. I wouldn't say it's the ultimate solution, but it is the most tangible solution, and it's definitely going to be the filler point until we get to ideally where we want to be, which is, I suppose, maybe a bit altruistic on my part, but I do believe ultimately I have great faith in humanity. I think we have what it takes. And with that in mind, each and every person does need to take personal responsibility for themselves and stand up. First off, stand up against depression, stand up against, just say, I'm not going to be paying taxes anymore, whatever it is you need to do. But stand up, do something, just add to that vibe that creates that awareness, create that around you. We're all co-creators of this reality. So yes, what we can do, individual community leaders, is stand up, be counted, make your voice heard, reach out to people, gather your network, start informing them of the facts. Get in touch. Anybody wants to start getting this information out and they need a bit of help, I'm more than willing to speak to anybody about it. So please get in touch, get supportive, ask questions, be critical, dissect this information and dissect it again, look through it. And if you find flaws and you find things that aren't real, come to me, tell me. We all want to know if there's something wrong with it. So far, I can't find it. So far, this to me is 100% legitimate, and it's an absolutely huge, massive project, and we need everybody to be optimistic and positive and putting the right intent into it, because it's all about energetics. This project has, at so many levels, almost been subverted, and we're actually in the process now of fighting an infiltration into this by a cult that has infiltrated this network that we're working within. And what we need is, it really is about energetics. It's an energetic war, and the positive vibes are going to help us win and help us get this into the right intent, into the right purpose path, so it doesn't get subverted and used for malicious intent, as people are trying to do. And this is also one of the reasons why I know this is so real, is because of the huge amount of subversion tactics that's going on and low-level harassment of the delegates that's currently going on. And in particular myself, because I'm in media, I've really been at the brunt of it. So yeah, what we don't need any more of that. What we need is people getting supportive now and getting involved and getting up to speed with the information, understanding, who we are, what we are, standing in our power, understanding, okay, this is humanity's inheritance. We are going to use these funds in a productive way. We're not just going to go chuck it all into, the slot machine down at the local casino. And all of that needs to be educated into people. So it's a massive process. It's not just a case of getting the money out. It's about healing the perceptions of a generation of very, very over-programmed and emotionally scarred people. It's a huge task. It really is. And as I said, what we need more than anything is support, is open-mindedness, and the willingness to get to grips with the information and assess it based on its own merits, because it stands on its own merits. And I'm the international media contact for Swissindo, and really wanted to sort of be able to deal with these questions. And there's a lot of, a lot of unnecessary fear from people, I suppose. People look at this as perhaps too good to be true, and perhaps it is. Who knows? We may have walked ourselves straight into another Illuminati plot. At this stage, this is as much of a gamble for us as it is for anybody. But I've made my decision to be involved in this project based on all the information that was available to me at the time. And what I can tell you is that, having dealt with Sino and his people, they are amongst some of the most emotionally and spiritually evolved individuals in the way they've dealt with certain elements. I definitely believe you are at your best when you're overcoming adversity, and that is where you are given your chance to shine and show what you're made of. And that's where they've shone for me, is in their approach to certain difficult issues that we've been dealing with. So I know that they are good people and they have good intentions and they want the best for humanity. What they want is a group of people who also have good intentions, who have that basic fundamental orientation in place, also have good space for humanity. We are going to, within the networks we're rolling out, going to be having places for huge amounts of funding going towards media, exhibitions, events, and that sort of thing, which is where people like yourselves are going to be so valuable. And those resources are going to be made available to you guys too, to obviously help educate and empower people like you do with your current platform, which I absolutely love. So I think go with what you have in terms of offering us support. And if there's ever an opportunity in which we can, be a part of what you're doing, please let us know. And we'll work together to get this information out there.
Well, I'll tell you from my vantage point, and I'm not as familiar, obviously, with what you're doing as you are, but I do know cycles, and I always take every piece of information that I'm told, and I take a look at it from that vantage point. Because if I don't see it in the cycles, then it's just not going to happen.
Yes.
And I've used this understanding to track stock markets, to track my own life, and to track other people's lives, and so on, and even the United States and the world, the system of world economy and all these things. So I think the advantage that I see for what you're talking about actually becoming real in the world is that I do see that we are heading into a period of many, many years where society is going to be freer. When we were in the 1990s, that whole period of time was meant to be a very thriving, overdoing kind of period of time where, cars got bigger, houses got bigger, we spent a lot of money, and everybody was just rolling in the money, right? Markets were going higher and higher. So far in the last 10 years, we've been going through a more restrictive period where people have been held down and the economy has been suppressed and so on. And our rights have been taken away, and in the meantime, we're standing up against that as a people. In the next decade, and for about the next 25 years beyond that, we're heading into a society of greater freedom, free energy, advancements in technology, all kinds of things. The people are essentially going to be in power in that time. So what you're working on now really fits that scenario. It's a little premature. That's my only concern, is that it may take longer to really trickle down into the mainstream than the next few months or even the next year.
Yeah.
Maybe it will, but I think ultimately these are just little signs that we are headed in that direction, and all these things are eventually going to hit the mainstream, definitely by the end of this decade. So that's kind of what I'm seeing from my perspective.
I don't know how long it'll take, and it may take longer than any of us wanted to. No, every day that goes past, we lose 50,000 children to starvation and preventable illnesses. So each day it takes for me is too long. Again, when people ask me how long it's going to take, I can't tell, hey, because we don't. This again is such a new game for us. We don't know how long it's going to take to get all these systems in place, to get the world educated, to get the money to absolutely every person. We don't know. But what we do have is perfect intentions. Will we have perfect results? It remains to be seen. But again, I'm very optimistic when I hear your stories about your cycles. I was speaking to Michelle, and she was saying that obviously you're very talented with this sort of thing, astrology and whatnot, and reading people and things like that. And I was absolutely, absolutely thrilled to hear you say that you see it in the cycles too, because a couple of other people are saying this to me, and it's obviously motivating because I want to get involved with something where I can really make a difference. I've been bouncing between projects here and there, and I've put energies into so many frauds over the years that have just demotivated me, and I finally think I found something that's real, that's going to be the thing that gets us tangibly out of the dark, out of the clear from the suffering and suppression that we've been experiencing at these levels. So Again, if you're seeing it happening and you want to get involved, you want to help us, you want to give us a space to do whatever, you actively want to get involved with education in our programs, obviously we'll keep you on the list of people to be informed. And when those opportunities are available, we'll definitely do some work together. We need people like you who understand what's going on, on our side, with a positive attitude, helping us to educate people. So yeah, anything we can do together, Ethan, would be great.
Well, I think the reason we're doing this at this time is simply because of the timing of it. There are certain things that I know beyond the shadow of a doubt, and so I can assure you that we are headed in that direction. So you want to persevere, but just be patient. If you don't see everything happening before the end of this decade, and things may take a little longer, especially between now and 2016, there may be more obstacles to progress than any of us would like. But after that, between 16 and the end of the decade, we should start seeing some progress. But it really won't be until the very end of this decade, and then for the next 25 years and beyond, that we see the major amounts of progress. And a lot of it is going to come about as a result of the children who are in their teens right now, because there are certain things, there's a certain generation of children who were born in a window of time who have elements in their own astrology charts that will be activated when they get into their 20s. And that in the 2020s, they'll get into their 20s. And so those kids, and you can see it if you've, and I'm sure you've been paying attention, there are kids who are in that age bracket now who are already standing up and talking about these various subjects, from GMO foods, the financial system, and so on. And they know more than most adults know about these subjects. And we're going to see more of that. And in that first decade of this transition is when those kids are going to stand up and really take over the bulk of this movement. So that's their role in this world and in this future that we're heading into. We are, you and I, and those of us who are doing this now, we are just the pioneers who are preparing the way for them. But it's largely going to be their influence that causes this movement to pick up a lot of momentum. We mentioned earlier about the Vatican letter, and that was recently issued, essentially separating church from state, from what I understand. I have not read the actual letter, but you probably know much more about that. First, can you explain the letter for our listeners who are unfamiliar, and tell us what are the implications to the global system and to us individually in the world?
Wow, sure. The apostolic letter. This is quite something, actually. It's quite symbolic and quite important, and it's something that people need to kind of get their heads around, because what the apostolic letter symbolizes is the biblical apocalypse. Now, the word apocalypse means to uncover or to unveil, and this was the unveiling letter, okay? The apostolic letter, like apocalypse, the words are not similar for no reason. What it's basically done is it's taken enemy number one and potentially made them public ally number one, okay? And I know this is difficult to get your head around, because the Vatican have historically been, the Roman cult have been the axis of evil for so long. But this is where you need to have a spiritual understanding of what is going on here. And that is that the contract with darkness is over. For a long time, there was this darkness anchored on our planet. You call it Lucifer, you can call it the Titans. There's many names it's taken over the years. It's been anchored in density. But the Christians have demonized it by saying, it's bad, it's evil, it's this, it's that. No, it's nothing good or bad about light or dark. It's just light or dark. Light is creation, darkness is the space within which creation happens. They are symbiotic. And it's very much the same. We've needed a negative catalyst to catalyst humanity through evolution. We are at our best when we're overcoming adversity. And this is why it's necessary to have this dark catalyst to push out and accelerate our evolution. Now we've exited this contract of darkness. That happened on supposedly with the alignments of the planets on the 21st of December 2012. It's not coincidental that, for example, the OPPT filings came out on the 25th of December, just a few days later, which gave us some tools that we've in the projects I'm working with now, definitely using. So this is it, is that there is definite not only, just based on what we've heard about prophecy, there's now sort of physical proof to these prophecies happening. We had the prophecy about the Pope stepping down, which he did, which is the first in 600 years. And then this Pope obviously stepping up. Oh, and guess what? He's a Jesuit Pope. Now, what's interesting, and I know you probably want to talk about the Jesuits at some point, so we can sort of tie it together. The Jesuits have been the controlling core axis within the Vatican for several hundred years, and they've evolved through various incarnations, various secret societies, and have always been known to be nefariously evil. Except the Jesuits have been the keeper of the ultimate secret of humanity, which is what I call the nexus point of the Ouroboros. The Ouroboros being the symbol of the serpent, which is consuming itself, okay? So what you're looking at is now the head that's coming around to the tail, all right? One part obviously representing good, the tail, and the other part obviously representing evil, which is the head. And now they're starting to connect. So what's going to happen, okay? We're now at that connecting point, that nexus point where these guys have been exposed for all the child abuse and all the, money they've laundered, the mafia and all that they control. They have a choice. They either, implode, crumble even further, or they step up and start cleaning out their mess. And this is what they've decided to do. And I do believe it has a lot to do with spiritual contract. Their karmic contract to anchor the darkness is over. We've had testimony actually from someone I work with in a project who says that they got a phone call from someone inside the Vatican, one of the cardinals saying, it's not that we're evil. We don't want to do this. We have to do this as part of our contract on this planet. So there's all of this to understand that it's not a simple case of black and white, good and evil. There's many subtle layers of spiritual reality playing out, many circles of karmic debris unfolding and now being resolved. So this is what it all represents to me, is these guys are now cleaning up their mess, sorting through the karmic debris, because their contract with darkness is over, and perhaps it's time to bring a little bit of light into the world, which is why they're now engaging on backing the findings of grand juries. And I know Kate is also involved with these grand juries, common law grand juries all over the world. And I'm also involved with organizations who are setting up common law grand juries at different points. So, there is now the backing that the Jesuits will enforce any common law grand jury findings that are ruled, which is great, because one thing common law courts have up till now have not really had, and that is any kind of enforcement. So this is positive. For me, I think it's a positive step for humanity. And it was always the question of what do we do with the bad guys when this all comes down? And I think repurposing them, as we can see happening, is possibly the best thing we can do. Ultimately, we don't want to add to the old paradigm of torture and deprivation of punishment by imprisonment. I'd rather think that we could forgive and rehabilitate some of the darkest elements of humanity. I think that's how we prove that as humanity we are in fact evolved creatures, is by engaging in that process.
Are you saying essentially that the people at the Vatican have been consciously following this path, doing the negative things they've been doing in the past, because they felt that they had a karmic responsibility to fulfill certain contracts on Earth, or do you think that it's just the awakening of consciousness that globally is causing this shift, and they're just sort of unconsciously following along because it's just how it, just like the rest of the world is unconsciously following along with the awakening of consciousness?
I think it's both, a bit of both. Let me just say, people sort of at the lower levels, I don't mean low levels by any derogatory terms. I mean, people sort of say your average priest who's engaging in darkness probably doesn't know about what I call the covenant of salt, which is this contract with darkness. I'm actually writing a book about it at the moment. And the contract with darkness is a very interesting thing. You hear all sorts of interpretations of this as the Faustian pact, the deal with the devil. People in the music industry do it all the time. So there is all of this that is known in popular culture, and it's a very real thing. All right. Now, those who've made the deal with the devil, sort of at the lower levels, who aren't part of the inner secret societies, they don't know the whole game. They don't understand that they are purposefully fulfilling a role of evil, ultimately to anchor the darkness, which ultimately serves the greater good of humanity. Because if they did know the game, why would they participate in it? Okay, they have to remain veiled. However, there are those at the very core, I would call them the game masters, the people who orchestrate the game, who absolutely know this. And I'd say those people probably are the heart of everything, which is the Jesuits. This is why now they've come out, because they know the game, they know how it's played. They know, okay, well, we've done the dark, but now it's time to do the light. But it's part of karmic contract. It's part of what they've been there to do. And it's part of their choice in incarnating here, is to serve in that respect. That was their choice when they came in here. And, anyone coming in and choosing a life of darkness, actually, you know what? You're accumulating an amazing amount of karma, which has to be resolved and gives you amazing growth at some other point. So again, light and dark, good and evil is a matter of perception, how we interpret things. And I know this is difficult for people to understand. If you've got a child that's been sexually abused, you definitely look at certain things as very dark or very evil. And I'm not saying that anything that they've done or condoning anything they've done is necessarily good or for the betterment of humanity. I just think there's a lot of residual negative programming that has manifested as a result of this anchoring of darkness.
Now, we talked about James McBride earlier. He mentions that he's the chair of St. Peter, and so in being that in that position, he's able to instruct the Vatican on their decisions. And he claims that the reason that they put a Jesuit in as the Pope was because he requested that in order that the Jesuits set right what they made wrong in the first place, essentially to balance out the karma. Are you familiar with any of that, or do you have any opinion on that?
That would be lovely if that was the case, and good for James McBride if that is in fact the case. Well done to him. From what I've always understood is that the Jesuits actually control the papacy. So the Pope confesses his sins to a Jesuit priest. And so I don't understand how necessarily that would work, that he instructed the Jesuits, or he instructed people to put a Jesuit Pope in there, because, as I say, the Jesuits, the Superior General of the Jesuits, who's currently known as Nicholas Adolfo Pachon, controls everything. And he's the person that's ultimately sits at the Pentagon. So I don't know if that's the case. But it could be, and if he's done it, I think it's amazing, and congratulations to him.
What do you think is the reason for all the significant events happening in the world these days? I mean, do you think has something to do with a consciousness awakening, or is there something else that you would connect to that?
Absolutely. It's a crescendo of events. It's a number of timelines which are converging at one point. So many different things that are meant to be playing into an ultimate finale are now starting to come together. And people will notice in their own lives chaos, up and down, lots of things happening. And, people who forever your life best friends are suddenly, your worst enemy. Things are turning inside out, upside down. We're having a complete shift going on in everything. People are finding a lot of chaos. Now, it's the retrograde. No, it's not the retrograde. This lasts longer than the retrograde. There is an absolute crescendo of events, and that on the microcosm also is affected on the macrocosm. Each individual one of us experiencing this kind of chaos and convergence. You can believe it with all the things we see going on around us at the moment. It's all happening. The timing is, it's not coincidental. It's obviously all tied into each other.
Now, you've done a considerable amount of research into the bloodlines of world leaders, as well as the origins of the current control system. I know it's a lot to sum up in a few minutes, but can you give a brief history of the world that is not written in our history books, including how the Vatican came into power to the evolution of the modern system of governance?
Wow, how long do you have? Gee whiz. Well, I'd like to say if you want more detail, I've actually got a book out. It's a free ebook on my website, freedomcentral.info. You can download it, and it really covers everything you've just spoken about. So I know I've written a book, and so I know a lot about it. I've gone in deep into the research, and it's not something you can go in a linear fashion. What I will say is that, yes, there has been this very dark presence that has controlled and manipulated humanity. It's not all doom and gloom. As I say, they've actually been serving a purpose. And I do believe that contract is over. These entities have obviously entered into positions of power through various bloodlines, and definitely you do the research. There it is. You trace these bloodlines through all sorts of interesting characters in history. I think you mentioned that you wanted to speak about Mel Ve, and Mel Ve's one of those characters that these bloodlines move straight through. So you pick up all these very interesting folklore fairy tales about sort of dragons and serpentine beings and mermaid-looking beings that come up in these bloodlines. And of course, when you start looking at the work of David Icke and you go, my, there could really be something to this. It just can't be ignored. The imagery is found everywhere and in very ancient places as well. So, you want to ignore it, you're ignoring a pivotal part of what could be our history. And actually, one of my favorite books at the moment, and I've read it quite a bit and quite extensively and quite detailed because I'm using it for a book I'm writing, is called The Murder of Reality by Pierre Sabak. It's Hidden Symbolism of the Dragon. And this thing basically helps you decode our entire language, and nearly all of our language is based in serpent symbolism. So we've even been taught to speak in a way that goes back to this sort of a dragon cult, which I think has manifested in the modern day Roman cult. If you go into things like St. Peter's Basilica, you look in the center of St. Peter's Basilica, the central altar has 4 pillars around the central altar, which are serpent pillars. They're like scaly and wavy. And then the word basilica comes from the word basilisk. Now, what is basilisk very similar to? Obelisk. There's an obelisk outside St. Peter's Basilica. So you start to look at the wordplay, and again, as I'm saying, it all comes back to dragon origins. We cannot ignore this, and it precipitates every culture around the world. I've got a book here on mythology that I bought when I was at university 20 years ago, and I found it when I went back home 3 years ago in my mom's old dusty closets. And I pulled this thing out, and this is long before I knew anything about anything. And even in these books written in the 1970s, as this was, an encyclopedia of mythology, you find references to the Naga, a dragon-like race in Indonesia. You find references to Quetzalcoatl in South America, again, a plumed serpent. And this is, for me, something that is a very fascinating line of research. I'm very much into the school of the Ophiolatreia, which is the study of serpent worship, not from a dark perspective, but also because, as I've said to you, the darkness serves a purpose. It serves the light in some respects. And understanding the true nature of the dragon, which is dualistic. The yin and yang is actually symbolic of the dragon in ancient Chinese cultures. So understanding duality and understanding that good could not exist without evil, light could not exist without dark, etc., yin and yang, is to understand the innate nature of what was the ancient spiritual worship of the serpent. And I think that's really how where a lot of our religions and things evolved out of. And of course, we've gone from a world that's ruled by, the sword and the Bible to being ruled by banks and corporations, but it's ultimately still the same families of people who are running it, and they always have done. And I think there's been a lot of, within these power structures, fractioning off and power plays within those particular people as well. So they're all at war with each other within the elite. They at the moment, things are falling around everybody, and they're looking at, all right, who are we going to scapegoat here? Who are we going to throw to the wolves? Okay, well, last year we threw Bernie Madoff to the wolves. Okay, let's find somebody else to throw to the wolves this year. So we can kind of keep them off our back. And this is how they go about it. And there's a huge conflict. So it's crumbling from within. It's been too much for too long, and people are waking up. We've been able to access information. We've moved out of the dark ages where the church controlled all the literature. You couldn't read unless you were a holy man. And then it became a case of if you're a wealthy man, you can go get taught by the Jesuits. And until the early 1800s, there was no such thing as public education. It was only for the wealthy. And then, of course, the industrial age came in and gave us industrially based education, which we still have. And our educational system is really about creating people to turn the system. And all of this, it ultimately ties into and is controlled by the same mechanisms that control society through the same bloodlines, which ultimately all somehow seem to run back through the Vatican.
Doesn't Catholicism originate with Paganism, which wasn't that a worship of fish god or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, here we got this scaly, half human, half man Dagon, which we've just spoken about. It all links back to this serpent dragon worship, or half fish, half human. It depends on how you want to label it with modern language, but it's ultimately it's the same sort of creatures. That's exactly what it is. Catholicism absolutely links back into that. In fact, there's so many beautiful old Catholic cathedrals and stuff in Europe that you can visit if you're here. And one of my favorite is actually a basilica in a town not too far from us. And the whole thing on the inside has got hand-painted dragons. In fact, the walls are covered in hand-painted tiles, and each tile is a dragon. So, yeah, absolutely. This Dagonism absolutely is the base of the Catholic Church. As we know, they wear the mitre, which is supposed to be the fish hat. It all stems back to the same Ophiolitria serpent worship.
Yeah, I think you touched on this a little bit, but would you say that this origin in this serpent worship, or this civilization that might have been the origin of the serpent worship, is that a dark race, or is it not?
Well, again, I think we need to shift past looking at things as dark or light in terms of good or bad. I think really we need to look at it as people who, the definition is, are you in service to yourself, or are you in service to others? Anything is permissible, I'd say, in service to others. I'm not saying anything. Obviously, there's principles which we adhere to under common law, which is do no harm, cause no loss, do not impede the freedom of another. And that stands no matter what. So, what is good and what is bad, a lot of it's down to perception. But obviously, ancient cultures, like everyone, I think, and ultimately we're born good, and it depends on a lot of our experiences as to what evolves out of them. We don't know enough yet to know exactly what the ideologies were or are. We've just got relics, and we hear things from like Palmer Manly Hall. If you go through some of his old material and lectures, talks about ancient Atlantis worshipped the golden serpent, and somehow they came along to the Chaldeans, their priests came along to the Chaldeans and brought the serpent worship religion there. And apparently a half human, half serpent, half fish man came out, someone by the name of Oannes, which gave them the assistance of government and rule and law. And this is all in ancient mythology, taught by some very amazing scholars of the past. So it's a consistent theme. It comes up everywhere, whether it's light or dark. I think it's debatable. Again, remember what I said about ancient religions is they didn't see light and dark. They saw the purpose of everything being the purpose of light and the purpose of dark. It's only sort of Christianity that kind of went evil, the fruit in the docks and in the shady side of the garden is the evil side, don't go there. Instead of, going, actually, maybe the fruit in that side of the garden may be a bit sweeter, for example. It's just a different interpretation of things, and really they've used a program of fear to keep us away from, I think, greater knowledge, which is ultimately the piercing of the final veil of deception, which is the understanding of the purpose of both light and dark, and knowing that one cannot exist without the other. And that's when you've worked past that, then you understand the concept of oneness, and that everything is one, even the light and the dark. It's all part of the same creation.
You mentioned Michael Tellinger earlier, and I am familiar with the Ubuntu movement, but he's done also considerable amount of research in South Africa into the ancient civilization that once built all these amazing stone structures there. And he apparently has found gold mines that are tens of thousands of, possibly 100,000 years old, that were cut into the mountainside using technology that he says we don't have today, the ability to do that. I'm curious if in your research you have come to a conclusion about where did we get this obsession with gold that we still have today? I mean, what is the foundation of that, and is there something that's not what it appears to be? I mean, today obviously it's become a very material thing that we, nowadays, having been in the financial world previously, I'm familiar with that whole conversation. Everybody's talking about buying gold and silver and so on these days. But where did that come from? And what's the point? What is it about?
Yeah, that is such a good question. There's so many different schools of thought on this, and I'm myself not entirely sure as to where I sit. I think there is definitely huge misinterpretation from our sides as to the purpose of what gold is and why there was this obsession with it. It's an incredibly interesting material, very soft. Gold in its purest form is incredibly soft. Some gold bars that I remember from as a kid, like putty, they were so soft you could sort of bend them, and yet it's not magnetic. And it's got incredible healing qualities like colloidal silver. Colloidal gold is amazing. And then, of course, you've got monoatomic gold, which is just the most amazing stuff. It's actually gold in its atomized particle form, and it makes a white powder. If you take this, you ingest this stuff and you start eating it, it just heightens your consciousness and it heals your DNA. It actually goes into your DNA and heals it. I'll give you a little example of how this works. It ties into something to do with Monsanto, which is quite ironic. And then as Monsanto make the soybean, which is Roundup Ready soybean, which basically it's they spray this stuff called Roundup onto the soybeans to stop the bugs from getting to it. But they have to actually put a gene into the soybean to make it resistant to this particular insecticide. So how do they do that? What they do is they actually infuse modified DNA with how? With monatomic gold. Because it's atomic structure. The monatomic gold actually is the carriage. It delivers the altered DNA to the gene sequence, and it heals it, okay? So it is the carrier of the DNA, which is very interesting to note. They use gold particles to do that, to alter the sequence of the genes of the soybean to make it resistant to this particular insecticide, which just is ridiculous. So, yeah, monatomic gold actually can heal our DNA and on so many ways. It increases consciousness, increases your vibrational frequency. I've seen experiments where they take white powder of gold, they put it into a pan, they heat the pan up, and the white powder of gold is gone. It's just not there anymore. And then the pan cools down, and it's come back, and it's in the exact same shape that it was before. But where did it go? It seems to have moved into another dimension when it was heated, yeah, because it wasn't there. And then it came back when it cooled down. So there's a lot of fascinating facts about gold that, there's many things I think can have been done with it, probably used as for energy. They say the reptilians used it for healing and for all sorts of things, potentially an energy shield or whatever. But there is definitely something very unique about it that we're not quite grasping. But I'm still open to anyone who's got any interesting ideas on this particular matter.
You're referring to Ormus. We had a presenter at our recent expo who spoke on the subject of Ormus. His name is David Kane, and I talked to him about it, and he said that he's showing some promising results as to whether we can reverse GMO crops back into their normal state using Ormus. And he talked about, I believe, I want to say it was some kind of, I can't remember what kind of flower it was, but it was some kind of a flower that they were growing in their garden. They treated it with Ormus, and it was a hybrid version. It wasn't its original. And they treated one with Ormus and one without. And after a couple of seasons, the one that they treated with Ormus actually turned back to its original whatever kind of flower that it was. And they've seen similar results with it as well. And he also has some interesting theories about the origins of gold and how it was really largely used for the spiritual. enhancement and health enhancement aspects of it, and obviously, in the field of Ormus and monatomic gold, there are huge breakthroughs happening in the area of health and consciousness. I've used it here. I have friends who can see the human energy field, and also expert dowsers, and we've done experiments here where I've taken the Ormus, and then all of a sudden my energy field just expands so far that with a dowsing test, he had to go about 100 feet out to be able
Wow.
to test it, and so it does. It's doing something. It's pretty incredible. So,
Mm.
but that's an area that fascinates me as well. Now you have, and I'm not exactly sure what you're doing in this field, but I believe you're involved in some kind of an international court, right? Uh,
Well, really, I'm just interested in common law and getting common law courts set up and rolled out. I had done a bit of work with various people, but the most important stuff is the stuff that we've got coming out at the moment, which is the rollout of common law grand juries, I think all across America. And we're starting to set them up in other countries. I've set up initiated the setup of common law courts in South Africa with various people, and it's going on everywhere. People are starting to understand, that we live on the commons, not on the ocean. We can't be ruled by admiralty law. We should be ruled by this law, because that's actually the right one. And it's so basic and simple. There's only 3 rules, and people are getting it. They're absolutely getting it. So I think it's just a case of now getting the systems and structure in place that we can actually go about putting these things in place. And most certainly the project that I'm working on at the moment is very actively doing that. And I think it's very promising that the Jesuits have stepped up and agreed to enforce common law grand jury findings, because that is what the courts were missing. Common law courts were only kangaroo courts without any form of enforcement. If you don't have the backup, there's no point in even running them in the first place. So we're looking at exciting times in the whole changing of financial systems, legal systems, and educational systems. I was tingling earlier when you were saying you want to set up homeschooling educational systems, and that is something that's been a project in the back burner of my mind for so long, because, probably where you are, wanting to bring kids in, but know so much and know that if I were to educate them, I'd probably do a better job than their school. And let's make that education available and accessible to everybody online. Look at some kind of programs and structures in doing that. For me, this is really where it all needs to be going now. Is we need to be focusing on the solutions aspect of everything, which starts with educating kids in common law. And then it starts bringing in the structural systems of common law as well. So we're not indoctrinated into this old paradigm nonsense that you get at sort of government structured schools.
So how is it you can create a legal or a court system that's not recognized by the current legal establishment? And what gives you the authority to do that?
No one gives me any authority. In fact, no one gives you any authority. You don't need the authority of anybody to do the right thing. The bottom line is, I'm sure you're the type of person who's never liked authority. I certainly don't. I think it's the nature of every freedom fighter. So I don't seek the authority of anybody to do the right thing. What I do seek is the collaboration of good minds to create good systems of social governance. So I think if you've got enough people who are working towards a good idea, a good end, that's all you need. We do actually have, there's legal books out there which talk about these courts that have been set up apart from sort of mainstream governments, like the Book of Hundreds, which talks about community courts and stuff. So it's been done in history before. There's all sorts of precedents upon which we can base the reasons for us doing these things based on past history. And it's been well documented. So, just even within, I'll give an example in South Africa, common law jurisdiction is actually written into our constitution. We just never exercise it. We choose to acquiesce to maritime law through working in a commercial system. So, who gives us the authority? We don't need the authority. Common law has been endowed to us by a creator. It's not given to us by anybody, and it cannot be taken away. We don't need the authority of anyone to do the right thing. We just need to be work with the highest possible integrity, try and find the most effective systems going forward, which obviously is going to be trial and error. And, let's try and at least create a new world. And we definitely do need new court systems for this. And we're going to have to repurpose existing courts under common law. And that is part of one of the projects what I'm working on at the moment. And there are legal processes in place for that to start happening because the old system's crumbling. It's been foreclosed. It doesn't work. So, they've got a choice. They can continue to fight us forever or they can start to cooperate. And the authority that we supposedly need or want actually will be given to us by the very people who in the past have stopped us.
So does that mean that your whatever rulings that come out of these courts that you're working on will be recognized or somehow validated by the existing system, or is that even necessary?
To be honest with you, I don't know what the future holds. I can't actually comment on that. The hope is that we can just get a more just system than what we've got at the moment. I mean, with all due respect, it's pretty dire. It's very corrupt. And for me, I think if we can just get a more fair system, something more humane and something that's not about continually screwing over humanity, I think we will have made progress. I don't offer any perfect solutions. All I have is perfect intent.
In one of your other interviews, you talked about how ancient historical figures have been cleverly worked into our modern culture. As an example, the Starbucks logo, which you touched on a few moments ago. I found this really fascinating. Can you share some of the origins of this logo and some of the other most interesting instances that you found of ancient figures in our modern culture that probably most of us are not even aware of?
Absolutely. Symbolism is one of my favorite areas of research. I get really excited about this stuff, especially when I find symbols. I'm like, look there, look there. It just tickles me. I'm like a little child. But one of the Melazine symbol is a very interesting symbol. Starbucks. We'll start with the Starbucks one. Anyone go to Starbucks, check out the Starbucks logo. It appears to be a mermaid holding her split tail in each hand. Now that is the heraldry symbolism of, or the heraldry depiction of a figure called Melazine, which actually can be traced through history as a queen that actually did live and was claimed by her servants to have scaly legs like a serpent or a lizard. And she really did exist, and she was unspeakably evil, had a penchant for torture and public executions and blood drinking and all sorts. Also from the same bloodline as Count Dracula, Vlad Tepes. So it's that same bloodline. And her icon is now used as a Starbucks logo. The other interesting figure which comes up is Alfa Romeo. Now, I just love this one. The Alfa Romeo symbol is a circle with half of it is a Maltese cross, and the other half actually happens to be a serpent with a crown on his head eating a man. It's a man sticking out of its mouth, just the arms, shoulders, and head sticking out the serpent's mouth. That's very interesting. And it's particularly interesting when you actually start looking at the name Alfa Romeo, because Alpha is obviously A, the first letter of the alphabet. Now, the letter A, in its capitalized form, is actually the pyramid with the all-seeing eye on top. I don't know if you know that. But Alpha is the pyramid with the all-seeing eye, the one that comes first, the alpha male, the alpha dog. It comes at the beginning of the alphabet. And it's not a coincidence that the A actually is the pyramid with the capstone of the all-seeing eye. That's what it's meant to represent. So it's, you start reading deeper into some of these things and looking into some of these symbols and what they're actually all about, you start to realize that a lot of these corporations, and it's through the symbols that you can see that they're all tied into the same little tight, clicky cabal.
When did Melazine actually live? Do you know?
When? Melazine was around the Carolingian dynasty era, I think around, if I'm not mistaken, yes, the counterpoint to it was around the 1100s when Fulk became the king of Jerusalem and the king of England at the same time. He ruled the illegally captured city of Jerusalem and I think married off his daughter Melazine to the Count of Poitou, who then brought this woman back to France with him. And so it's around that era, just sort of towards the 1100s, the thick of the Crusades area. That's around when it was.
Okay, so this is a fascinating topic, and you probably have a lot to say about it, and I want to just, let you run with it and share whatever you can. But I'm curious. I've heard you talk a lot about the Jesuits, and I'm curious. I know a little here and there, but not a lot in depth, and I'm sure most people don't know hardly anything about it. But who exactly are they? What is their significance in the global system of banking and government, and so on?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, the Jesuits, the word Jesuit is actually the shortened version of the Society of Jesus. And the members of the Society of Jesus were given the name Jesuits because of the overuse of the word Jesus. So they were called the Jesuits. And they are controlled by what is known as the Black Pope, who is the real power. The White Pope is just a figurehead for an institution. The Black Pope being the Superior General. His name is Adolfo Nicholas Pachon. As I said, he works mostly out of the Pentagon. He's got offices in Rome as well. And basically, he's one of the most powerful men in the world. And they are the rooting of the Roman cult, ultimately. And they are controlled as well by what I could part of what I would consider the black nobility, the Aldobenzinis, the Pisos, the Medici bloodlines of Italy, the Godfather family type figures. So that's really sort of where they fit. But what you'll find is that what's significant about the Jesuits is every single secret society, and I can prove this through my research, every single secret society, whether it be the Fruits of Islam, the Order of the Assassins, whether it be the Freemasons, whether it be the Skull and Bones, whether the Hell's Angels, interesting one for you, the Mafia Commission, they're all controlled by the Jesuits. Isn't that interesting? So they control a lot of secret societies, gangs, clubs, groups, cults, numerous cults. The amount of nefarious, or you want to label them satanic cults that are controlled by the Jesuits is phenomenal. You would think, it'd be the complete contradiction, but it's not. So there's all of this going on. They control pretty much all the elements of control and darkness in the planet. As I say, they're the anchoring of the darkness, and that's sort of their purpose. And it's a very interesting subject. If you're interested in getting more research about it, I'd recommend checking out my book, because there's just so much about them. And ultimately, there's a lot of sort of controversy here, because it seems what they're doing now is that they're stepping out and they're going, okay, we know we've made a mess. Now we need to clean up. But what I keep saying is, okay, so what happens? They clean up their mess, and then do the people get to try them, for their crimes? Or how's that going to work? So they're playing massively into the global political scene at the moment, having pretty much tried to stay in the background as a secret society controlling the world. Suddenly they're stepping out and saying, hey, we're giving you the opportunity to help enforce changes in the world. Part of 80% of me is like, yay, the contract of darkness is over. These guys have come out. They're going to come help us. And then there's still the small part of me that's going, hang on, the Jesuits are some of the most pernicious, nasty buggers in history, and they have done some pretty rancid stuff. Like, for goodness sake, they invented the guillotine, and most of the torture instruments that came out sort of that nature around the French Revolution, all invented by Jesuits. So they're a pretty nasty bunch, and they've done some very nasty things. And if you want to find out just how nasty, I would suggest just Google something called The Extreme Oath of the Jesuits and read it, because this basically explains and lays out the whole agenda of the Jesuits. And this is the oath that they have to swear upon becoming a Jesuit, which it says things are promised to wage war against my brother, even if he's a Jesuit and he may be engaged on the other side, but always we know that the ends justifies the means, this sort of thing. I mean, it's like, whoa, when you read this thing, you kind of realize why everything is in such a state on the planet and the way it is. It's pretty much laid out in this one oath.
So you said that the Jesuits are, from your vantage point, it seems like they're actually trying to step on the other side and repair some of the damage that's been done over the years. Do you have a good example of something like that that's happening in the world right now that where they're doing that?
Yeah, again, the most obvious example, because I think it is the only one at the moment, is the offer to enforce the findings and verdicts of Grand Court juries. I beg your pardon, of common law grand jury findings. And like I think that's a great idea. That's a good place to start, because what we the people don't need anything more, but we do need a little bit of enforcement. We've got all the resources to do everything, and it is time that the power comes back to the people. So, but we do still need a little bit of the existing structure to perhaps get some of these things enforced. So we've got to look at repurposing some of the existing structure. One of the projects I'm working with at the moment is actually working with repurposed divisions of the United Nations. So, there is a lot of, it just simply can't get anywhere. So if we don't do something about it, we are going to implode, and we have a choice. And I think we, as humanity, have turned the corner. I'm not saying it's completely over. It may still take a few more years, but we are definitely moving in the direction of getting this sorted, and the solutions are being put in place. So, you know what? These guys have two choices. They can either be consumed by their own misery and negativity as the whole world moves into an enlightened space, or they can participate in the creation of that. I personally would prefer that they participate in the creation so that we can use the existing structures and repurpose them.
At the current rate of changes you're seeing in the world, if you were to predict a time frame for the system to collapse, if you can even, if you're even willing to do that, or rather collapse and be rebuilt into something better, what do you anticipate?
Yeah, it's an ongoing process. The collapse has been happening for a while. There's a lot to collapse. It doesn't just all drop one day. So it's been collapsing for a while. Again, how long it'll take before we go from where we are to total collapse to then rebuild, or will there be a lovely sort of overlaying period and we don't really feel it? It's difficult at this stage. I'm working on a hugely pressurized project at the moment to try and minimize the impact of ending one system and going into another. And we really are trying to create that bridge between sort of a 3D, fiat currency, and ultimately where we want to go, which is a resource-based economy where we're exchanging eternal essence, as was the idea by Heather and Tucci Giraffe with the OPPT and the creation of something called the CVACs, which is the Creation Value Asset Centers. The idea ultimately is to be trading in our eternal essence value, because ultimately we give value to everything. The fact that we need some kind of physical representation is an auxiliary measure. That's very old paradigm. We don't. We just need to change our energy, because that's ultimately, what this theoretical liability tender paper that has money, figures written all over it. That's all it is. It's a representation of energy. And ultimately, that's what we are. So I think that's where we need to be moving to. However, how do you get humanity to move from, okay, we pay for everything now, to that? And this is it. It's the skillful bridge in between that this project I'm involved in is very cleverly trying to put into place. And I tell you what, I've never come across such a great challenge in my life. It has not been easy, because it's completely new territory. There are no rules. We're pretty much making it up as we go along. And I'll tell you what, bumping our heads hard in the process. So I can't give you a time frame, because it's a continuous thing of hurdles we're overcoming that stretches the time frame out. What I can say is that it is on a continuum, and it is happening.
It sounds like you've got a lot of exciting things going on presently. So what's next on your journey in this or any particular area?
Well, I've got so many different projects that I've been working on for a while. I really want to finish my trilogy. The first book of my trilogy, which is The South African Guide to the Global Conspiracy, book one, Light and Dark. That's actually banned in my home country, and my publisher was attacked. And I don't even know if I can get back into South Africa without being arrested at the airport. So I'm not really sure what the deal is on that yet. But what I would like to do is finish the trilogy. This is typical of me. Oh, I'm going to write a book. I'm not just going to write one book. I'm going to actually write a book that's going to be 3 books eventually. So I've still got the second one to complete, which I'm very behind on, because it is actually focusing on all this stuff. It's called The Eye of the Dragon, and all the stuff we were speaking about earlier. But what I actually should be writing at the moment is the 3rd volume, which is called The Evolute, and that focuses on all the solutions stuff that I'm busy working on at the moment. So I'm running behind, because in between writing the books, I've also been making documentary films, and I've still got a few documentary films that I really want to finish editing up. These are some of the projects I'm working on, plus the project I'm involved in at the moment, which is sees the return of huge amounts of global collateral funds to the people of the planet for humanitarian projects, etc., and building this bridge, as we've been talking about, from one paradigm to the next. that for me is my most imminent focus, is getting this project off the ground. Because um, I'm come from Africa, and you've never seen poverty and suffering until you've been to a place like Africa. It's just, it's like quite, it never really sat well with me growing up. And the thought that 50,000 children a day die of starvation and preventable illnesses is just something that I personally don't think is a symbol of an evolved society. A truly evolved society cares for its weakest and its sickest. And as we evolve, we need to be looking after those at the very bottom end first. And for me, I see a huge shift in the energy of and the consciousness of the planet when we get half the world's population, because it's half the world's population that live on less than $2 a day. Okay, imagine we lift them completely out of poverty and suffering. Imagine the shift in energy and how fast we will be ascending into a new paradigm then. So I think that for me, the project I'm working on at the moment, that's the number one priority, is to get those who are on the most desperate end of things sorted. So yeah, lots on my plate. But as I say, I've got the intent of knowing that this has to be done, and I'll attack it with as many different things as I can and work on as many different angles for as long as I can, and while I still have the energy and inclination to do it. Because I tell you, sometimes I wake up and I go, oh God, what am I doing this for? But, it doesn't take long to remind me of why it is. I just, for example, watch the lady who works at our local grocery store walk past my window every day to this job that she hates. She's miserable and depressed. And I see this lady every day, and I think to myself, one day we are going to change the world for people just like you. She has to work behind a checkout till, passing stinky chickens through her hands. And, I feel for her. I feel for her and everybody that's suffering, everybody that's miserable and depressed, everybody that has a bad boss, everybody that can't pay their bills, every child that's hungry and suffering. I feel the collective suffering. I feel it, and it touches me on a very deep level. And I guess whilst I'm still feeling that, I'm going to continue to do this, knowing that if I'm not trying to do something to change it, I'm just going to experience the misery and suffering, then I may as well just be dead. So unless we're trying to do something about it, really, what is the point?
And where can people find out more about you, the work you're doing, and follow you in what you're doing?
You can check out my work on www.freedomcentral.info.
Great. And any final words of wisdom or guidance for our listeners who are, a lot of them, standing on the precipice with you and awakening to these changes happening in the world and not exactly sure what to make of all of it?
You know what, Ethan? It's so funny because when I do my interviews, that's always the question I ask at the end, and yet I never know exactly how I'd answer that question. I guess it just supposes where I am at that particular time. It's never the same answer. For me, if I had a message for humanity right now, I'd say we're almost there. Don't give up. Times are tough. Things are looking dreary, but there are good people out there who genuinely care about the outcome. And we're working very hard. I mean, very hard to try and make this planet a better place. I'm certainly not going to give up. I don't feel there's any other purpose to existence other than to try and create a world that's at least semi-tolerable and just. And I'm certainly encouraging anybody who is perhaps asking questions or thinking about things just to dive in. The University of YouTube is waiting you. There's so much to learn, and there's so many amazing people out there now doing amazing work and research and creating amazing content that we can all benefit from. So I think the most important thing, and I say this to everybody, is read, even if it's just for an hour or 2 hours a night. Turn off the TV, do your research, get to know more, enrich. You won't believe how enriched your life will become. It's incredible. And, you may just find your purpose if that is what you're looking for, if you haven't found it yet. But just know that everything is as it should be. And if you're listening to this now, then you're obviously on a similar path to me, or you're further down the path, or, perhaps starting. But keep going, because I think that this is definitely the winning game.
Great. Thank you so much, Mel Ve, for spending some time with me today and answering so many questions. I really appreciate everything you're doing, and I hope that in some way we'll be able to work together to help you make that happen as well, going down the line.
Wow, Ethan, you know what? I am ever so grateful for the connection with you guys. I'm very impressed by what I've seen of your organization, and I look so much forward to working with you guys in any capacity. So feel free to get in touch for anything you need. I'm more than happy to help, and I'll definitely keep you guys on my media mailing list for all the things that we've got coming out.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Lots of love.